Okay, this video is going to be about how to make a copy of this assessment data form where we've got a spreadsheet holding all of our assessment data where we can see it for each student, and we can see all of our different students testing data. There's nothing in here right now because there's no responses in the form, but that's what this video is going to be about, how to make a copy of this whole system. So the first thing we've got to do is make sure that these forms, this form and this sheet, aren't linked together right now, because if you're copying it from my public folder, it's not going to be. But if you're copying it from someone else, they're probably using it, and that means if you make a copy of this form, it's going to be linking back to their spreadsheet, and it's going to be an issue. So the first thing we do is we go into the form and we go to responses, and we can tell if they're linked together. If we hover over this green icon, it says view responses and sheets. It wants to view those responses because it is linked together. And so you can figure out what sheet it's linked to by clicking on that, and it'll pull it up, and we can see right down here I've got my little icon that says form responses. So we know that these two are linked together. So on the form, what I do is I go on the right hand side of that, 3 dots, go to unlink form, and now they're not connected together. And we can see it change because it says create spreadsheet underneath that little icon. Now I go up to my spreadsheet, the one that was linked before, and if something like this, see that icon's gone because I unlinked it. If you wanted to do it from this side, you right click on this and there'd be a little toggle that says unlink form. Anyways, if you don't have that and it's not linked together, I can delete this spreadsheet because we are going to be adding a different one in when we make a copy. So when I know that they're not linked together, now I can make a copy of both of them and give them a new name and make sure that I have my own. So I'm going to go up to the right hand side, 3 dots, and I'm going to make a copy. And I am going to give this a unique name just in case something were to be funky where it's shared with somebody else, and I want to make sure that I know that this is the one that I own because I'm making a copy of it. Now I'm going to want to move it into the folder that I want it in. And so the way they do this is if it's in my shared folder, you're going to have to back up out of a bunch of different folders. So you go this arrow, click back until you get to my drive. Then you can go to pretty much whatever you want. I'm going to put it in this projects folder here. Okay, and now I can get rid of the old one. And I'm going to do the same thing with this spreadsheet. I'm going to go to File, make a copy. I'm going to give it a unique name with my name on it. I'm going to back up out of all of these folders into my drive, find the folder that I want, and then I'm going to click Save. Right there, and then I'm going to get rid of the old one. Okay, so we've got our copy of it. Now we want to make sure the Google Forms set up the way that we want to. And you don't have a ton of customization in this, because if you were to customize a lot of the questions and the types of assessments, the names of these, it's going to screw with this form. So it's really set as far as what's going into this thing and what it's called right here without doing a bunch of customization. If you're comfortable with changing some of these queries and what it's asking for and things like that, then feel free to customize it however you want to. But if you're not comfortable with that, I would stay away from changing anything on this form outside of what I'm going to go through right now. The first thing you can do is if you want to change this and put some description, maybe you're having a para input some of this data, or you want to give yourself a reminder, you can put whatever you want to in this form description. Step 1, do X, step 2, do X, then do whatever, or how to bookmark it or whatever. You can change the student name. You're going to definitely want to do this. So I might put in my students' names: Sarah, Joan, Susan, Mary, and Christian. And you want to put them in there in a multiple choice or a drop down so that it's always going to look the same time. So every time I choose Sarah, it's always going to be capital S Sarah with no space after. That's important when we get into the Google Sheet so that the queries and all the formulas in there can recognize that this is the same Sarah every time. If you have 2 kids who are named Sarah, you're going to want to give them some sort of a last name like Sarah S or Sarah C or whatever that is for you, just to make sure that they are 2 unique people in this sheet. Then I'm going to want to change the date of assessment. I wrote this in here as a little note that it could be a lot of different things, but if for the sheet to work where it's going to pull and put the most recent score up at the top for example, their fast reading, you're going to want the date in there. So this is the date of the assessment. that the Google form is going to take a timestamp of when this form was submitted, but you're going to want to put in there the date of the assessment if it's not the same as the timestamp. And even if it is the same date, you're still going to want to put that in there so that it can read off of that data. And then this type of assessment, this isn't something that you're going to want to change. If you wanted to get rid of one of these, you could. You would have you just have some empty spaces on your sheet. But that'd be about all you could do with that. Then look through these questions and make sure that you've got all of the responses that you want. You can change some of the numbering and the lettering in the questions. So for example, if you wanted to not have 10 lists on fry words, you could get rid of some, or you could add some numbers to this. That would be fine. Some other things that you could change is you could add in book levels right here for the fluency test. If you wanted to have up to 4, 5, 4.5, whatever the options are, you could change this. Oh, it is a drop down. You could have it a multiple choice or a drop down. Either one works. Drop down's a little bit cleaner. Some other things that you could change. You could change this one right here if you wanted to, have some other area of concern for the FastBridge reading test. You could also have in here for the F and P, this would be a big one if you had different reading levels. I put F through R in here, but if you wanted to add some different reading levels as options to input, this is where you'd want to add those however you want. So that's about the most customization that you can do in this Google form. And now, once we're set up with this, we've got our student names in it, we've got the questions ready the way we want it, we've got this date change. Now we want to link this Google form up to our Google Sheet. And so I'm going to go to responses. One other thing to make sure that this is not a quiz. If one troubleshooting thing, if your form's or your Google Sheet's all messed up and it has some sort of a column that says score on it, I'll show you that in a second. That's where you made a mistake. So I go over to this green icon, click on it to create a form, and I do not want to create a new spreadsheet. I want to select my existing spreadsheet, this one right here. So I'm going to click select. I'm going to go up to the one that I just made, and we're going to link these two together. Okay, so you can see that I've got all of the reason why we linked it to an existing spreadsheet is so that it has all of these formulas in there. If you created a new spreadsheet, you would have just a blank Google Sheet with this form responses in the bottom of it, and you would have none of this other stuff. So now what I want to do is, there's really not a whole lot to change with this. I've just got to make sure that I name this sheet as capital I input, NPUT, no space at the end, and click enter. The reason why we have to have it that way is because all of these queries in here is looking for that exact text for a sheet being named that. You can see if we can see what maybe an issue would look like. So I'm just going to add a space on the end of this and then click enter. And you can see how this query that was yellow before because it had a sheet that was named input is now no longer yellow. And if I add a space in this, now all of a sudden it recognizes, oh wait, that's coming from right here. And so I want to make sure that when I'm naming this, I do not have a space. I can tell that it's hooked up because it's yellow right there. And so really, there's not a whole lot else to do. We can test this out to make sure that's hooked up right. I would click preview. Let's choose Joan. Let's say this assessment was taken today. This was a reading comprehension test for the accelerated reader. She was at a 3.5. Our percentage was an 87. And let's just make sure that it is working. So we can see on our input, Joan's work is in here. She's got her comprehension level, her percentage is in here, and we've got the type of assessment down. I should be able to see that if I go and find that assessment down in these tabs. I can see that I've got an issue, unresolved sheet name, input. Oh, there we go. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, maybe you've got to go to all of these and click enter once you've got them set up. So I'm just double clicking on them. Maybe just an enter will work. Enter, enter, enter. Perfect. So you do have to go through them, I guess, and click enter on all of them to make sure they're reading off of that, but it should be working. We can see that AR is set up, Jones information's in here. If I were to submit a different test, it would show up there. I maybe got to go through and find all these little reference things and click enter a couple times to get them set up. That should be the other one in the all set student data. And let's see if we've got to do the same thing here. So I click Joan's name right there. I can see that I want, let's say we want 3. There shouldn't be anything right here because it says query completed with an empty output. That means I haven't tested the fast reading score for Joan, and we can make sure that this is set up right by going Joan. Let's say she took it today, fast reading test. She got a 456 and the percentile was 67th. She was in the 3.5 reading level. Here, let's see. Okay, so there we go. Fast reading is set up there. Okay, so I guess some things to look for. Really, when you go through and you first get this set up, just going through and clicking enter for all of those to make sure our queries are working. You don't have to change any of them as long as you've set up your input right. If you go through and click enter for a bunch of those queries and nothing's showing up, and you can see that this is yellow, you probably typed in your input wrong. But other than that, there's not a whole lot that needs to be changed. I've put lock marks next to all of the Google Sheets here because you don't need to change anything with them. There's really nothing to do outside of getting those queries set up. For this all student data, there's nothing that needs to be changed on this sheet. It's just going to run after you get it set up again like I did at the start. And then for the single student data, none of this needs to be changed. And it's actually going to give you a warning if you try, something like that. So I want to cancel. But I can change these boxes right here. And so that's how you make a copy of this special ed assessment data.